Hello and Happy New Year to everybody out there. Thank you for listening to the Phil Talk Sports Podcast, Wildcard Weekend Playoff Edition. Happy New Year. I'm your host, Phil Nunziata, joined as I often am by Nick Rice. Happy New Year, Nick. I'm liking that jersey. It's looking good.
It's looking sharp. It's looking like a Rookie of the Year jersey. In fact, it's looking like a little more than a Rookie of the Year jersey, but I won't get spoiled.
Yeah. For the audio listeners, Nick has recently purchased a Justin Herbert Chargers jersey, which he told me about last episode. It didn't come in time, but at least it's here for this one. We've made it to Wildcard Weekend. How was your New Year's? How was watching, these playoffs take shape for you? Kind of a hectic weekend, even though there wasn't that many spots up for grabs.
Yeah, it was a fun weekend, and Happy New Year, Merry, holidays, whatever, to all of you guys out there. It was just a fun opportunity to catch up with family and watch some football. There's nothing like it this time of year.
Yeah, and really, there's absolutely nothing like what we're about to deal with this coming weekend, because this is the biggest wild card weekend ever with the extra playoff spot and having 3 wild card games per conference. They're naming it Super Wild Card Weekend, which is, well named because, again, it's the biggest one they've ever had. So we are going to deal with some stuff here that we've never dealt with. I mentioned the jersey before we get into this because we actually have another guest joining us. Robert Deiters from KTVN News in Reno, Nevada will be joining us to break down these playoff games, which I'm looking forward to. Let's talk a little more about this jersey game because, as you know, I'm a jersey fanatic. I collect a lot. This is your first jersey in a long time. So it's probably your first Nike one. And anyone that does collect jerseys know that back in the day when Reebok was a supplier, they were built a lot differently. They're more of that mesh material. They're essentially T-shirts now. So this is probably your first one since, I think you said, LaDainian Tomlinson jersey you've had forever. So how do you feel about the Nike style since this is your first one?
First of all, before I get into that, you mentioned Super Wild Card Weekend. I'd be remiss to not mention that Nickelodeon for the first time was broadcast, and that's the biggest Super Wild Card event. And then secondly, they have, adjusted some of the stitching. Before it used to be the type of numbers that will never come off if you go play backyard football. Now it's not quite the case. I bought a large. All of my other shirts are large, fit nice. This one certainly is a little big on me, but feels pretty good, to have the old Charger blue. I know you've collected quite a few jerseys in your day, but there's nothing quite like a Charger jersey, Phil. You're always welcome.
Well, I do have an LT Charger powder blue jersey, the old Reebok style. So I would agree with you. It's definitely anyone that collects jerseys outside of their team. That's definitely one that you must have. It's one of the nicest jerseys I think they've ever made.
Oh yeah, the Chargers powder blue is just and I took advantage of the Black Friday. It's a little bit more expensive now than $50 to get it shipped to your door, but I encourage all of you to hop on this train before the Herbert jerseys become $1 million a pop. Hop on now while you still can.
You mentioned you got a large. I also you said looking back, you probably could have got a medium. I'm not necessarily a small dude, but even I get mediums because the larges just seem to be dresses on you. So luckily you're taller than me, so that helps. But I haven't quite figured out the size with their jerseys yet. I used to get smaller mediums in the Reebok, and now you definitely get a medium in this style with Nike and the new setup here. So I'm still getting their sizes down, and I guess you would know next time now to get a medium, huh?
Right, or maybe, this is just how Justin Herbert jerseys wear because, this guy's freakishly huge, 6'4",
he's a big dude.
Yeah, so, it doesn't look like it sometimes because we have – and, before we get started, I have to mention Donald Parham caught another touchdown the other day, former Stetson Hatter.
Yes,
he's
sir.
6'8", playing tight end. So, I guess Herbert doesn't look all that big compared to some of the other guys, but this was a must-buy. Justin Herbert.
It definitely looks good. And after all the time it took you to get a new jersey, I think you settled on a guy that you didn't love too much getting drafted. And now 10 months later, you got his jerseys. Let that be a lesson to everybody who's got haters out there. They could become your biggest fan overnight. And this is proof of it right here.
Biggest fan. It's hilarious. And, Phil, that was so long ago. I was really hoping that you would just kind of let that thing go. But, I was very adamant against Justin Herbert. And I'm very glad to be wrong.
It's hard to let stuff go when it's on record. So you have to, you mentioned it on the show. So it's easy enough to go back to. You can't really hide it once it's on tape here.
Yeah, you really can't. But, you could always just delete it.
That's true. But I mean, what's the fun in that? All right, guys, we're going to take a quick break here. Again, thank you for joining us. So we're going to get Robert on the line, and we're going to talk some wild card matchups, so stick around. All right, we're back. We got Mr. Robert Deiters on the phone to break down some of these wild card games. How's it going, man? Good to hear from you.
Doing great. I can't wait for the NFL playoffs. An exciting year as always. And, man, who would have thought Green Bay Packers are the #1 seed, but they do lose a big piece on that offense with David Bakhtiari, my guy from Anipro Sarah High School. Had to give him a shout-out.
There you go. My brother-in-law, shout out to Mike, is a Packers fan, and we have both agreed that if the Packers won the Super Bowl, I would not be surprised. But if they got knocked out in the first round that they play, I also wouldn't be surprised. Because we've seen them play like ugly games, and we've seen them been dominant this year. But they're just one of those teams that they can go all the way or get knocked out in their first playoff game, and I wouldn't be surprised. They're definitely a unpredictable team with a MVP candidate of Aaron Rodgers on that team for sure.
And Phil, we talk about two great quarterbacks going into the playoffs, two guys that have both won a Super Bowl, but both want to solidify their legacy going in to the playoffs, which is Drew Brees and Aaron Rodgers. We know we talk about these two big names, two names that really want to win another Super Bowl. And if they win, they're still Hall of Famers no matter what.
Yeah.
We can say that for sure. But if they win another Super Bowl, Seahawks are struggling, man. I don't think Russell Wilson's got it this year. I think it's going to be between Aaron Rodgers and Drew Brees. That's my prediction, but let's see what happens. I think the NFC is just up for grabs.
The thing that has Drew Brees maybe a little more fire than, say, Aaron Rodgers is there's been a lot of reports that this might be Drew Brees' last go-around. There was even more reports that last year was supposed to be that way, and they kind of talked him into coming back for another year, let them solidify the quarterback situation for life after Brees. So this could very well be his last playoff run. I don't think we're not having that conversation about Aaron Rodgers yet. That's definitely not something that we'll see yet. But I could definitely see that would make a great NFC Championship showdown if we get Brees and Rodgers before he calls it quits. And those are two guys that if they win another Super Bowl, everyone will be happy for them. Even the saltiest division rival, I think it'll just solidify their run here. Let's go through the Saturday games first, because we mentioned in the intro, this is the biggest wildcard weekend ever by length, just because there's extra games. And Nick even mentioned that one of the games is going to be on Nickelodeon, which we'll get to, and I'm pretty intrigued on how that's all going to go. But we'll start with the Saturday games. We got Colts at Bills. The Bills, of course, finally winning the AFC East, for the first time since I think 13 years or whatever it might be. So the Colts are against the Bills. I have to go with the Bills on this one. I think the defense is going to be a little much for Phillip Rivers, another guy who might be playing in his last game on Wild Card Weekend. They're favored by 6.5. I think Buffalo just has way too much momentum to get tripped up this early.
Yeah, I feel Buffalo, especially with the way we saw them annihilate that Miami defense. I think that offense is just a little too much. We saw Indianapolis use all 60 minutes to struggle past the Jacksonville Jaguars. And there always is a team that's a kryptonite, but that is a telling sign to me that this team, with Rivers as, one of my favorite players of all time, doesn't quite have the firepower to match a team as high-powered as the Bills. So I see this to be relatively easy work. And Buffalo, such a playoff drought that it was, flirting with the Browns for the longest all time. They are right back into the thick of things, and I think this is a pretty easy win for them.
Yeah, I got to go with the man out of the University of Wyoming, Josh Allen, a man that has proven himself, wasn't a college quarterback, but man came into the NFL and really proved something. That Diggs, Josh Allen connection has shown all season long. And, I didn't really expect Cole Beasley to come out of nowhere, but almost over 1,000 yards receiving. Unbelievable for that type of offense. Singletary and Moss really carried the load. Some weapons on defense is really going to help them beat the Colts, but with the Colts, the Bills beating the Colts, but with the Colts situation, I think, yes, they had a great season. They had a great run, only 5 losses, and Phillip Rivers came in there and took over that offense, but I don't think it's going to be enough with that high-powering offense from the Bills.
Yeah, I think the Bills really are one of the harder teams. I think if you're an AFC playoff team and you can avoid them, you definitely want to. This is not a team anybody's lining up to play. And if we're giving shout outs of Bills players, I got to throw my guy's name, Gabe Davis, in there, the rookie wide receiver out of UCF with 7 touchdowns as a rookie, including a 51-yarder yesterday against the Dolphins. So he's, third or fourth on the depth chart. He's that talented. So to see, guys like Stephon Diggs and that offense with Josh Allen, who, is definitely should be in the MVP conversation. I think there's plenty of guys ahead of him, but he's definitely, if this was a Heisman situation, he should at least go to New York. He'd be that close to the other guys. But so we all agree, I think Buffalo is going to take Indianapolis, and they have the game at home, obviously, and they're going to have around 6,000 to 7,000 fans for the first time this year. There will be fans in a Buffalo home game, so that should give them that little extra juice, even though they shouldn't need it. I mean, they're in a great situation here. Moving on, and I'm actually going to start with Rob today on this one because this is more his specialty. The Rams at Seahawks. Seahawks are favored by 4.5. Very up and down season for the Rams. I don't know if you know an update on Jared Goff, if he's out completely with that broken thumb, but I would go the Seahawks here, I guess, to be quick about it, because I don't know where the Rams are. They've been very up and down here, but this is your specialty, so why don't you go ahead and take this one?
Man, I almost wanted to go with the Rams just because I thought they were the hot offense going into it. Russell Wilson, man, we saw him be like MVP, like he was winning 5 straight games, and then he took the loss to the Cardinals. But I'm going to go with Seattle. I think this team is ready to go. I think Russell Wilson needs to get that rhythm flow going. He has lost Chris Carson. He didn't have him like throughout the entire season. We saw a lot of the Carlos Hyde in that running back offense. We even saw the rookie as well. I think with the Rams, if Goff is out, I think game's over. But if Goff is going to be in, I think I got to go with the Rams. If Goff is in. We don't see that Legion of Boom that Seattle had so many years ago, that defense that was so solidified, so solid, a threat to any opponent. It's just not there anymore. I think Goff would just throw all over them all day, and the Rams get the job done. So I'm going to say without Jared Goff, I got to go Seattle. With Jared Goff, I'm going to go Rams.
Okay, fair enough. Nick, who you got?
All right, I'm going to be contrarian here. I got the LA Rams winning regardless of who they have a quarterback. What they did against Arizona really impressed me. And Seattle's defensive woes, while they were corrected late in the regular season, I think the Rams can carve them up. Regardless of what quarterback's out there, they have a 2-headed monster there, a running back, 2 guys that can tote the rock. With a relatively efficient yard per carry average. So I think the Rams do just enough to win it. I mean, it's a battle of 2 excellent head coaches. So I wouldn't put it past Sean McVay. When you enter the playoffs, it's a veteran league. It's a league where if you have the coach that has the playoff experience, I think you can win games there. And I think Sean McVay has that sort of experience against the team in the Seahawks that you don't know what you're getting out of either side of the ball either week.
So even if it's not Jared Goff, you're comfortable going into battle with John Wolford for this playoff game? Either way, all right. That's bold. I mean, we need some bold predictions on here, so I appreciate Nick for kicking it off. Robert mentioned the, kind of the decline a little bit of Russell Wilson. Me and Nick were doing kind of quarterly NFL updates. We would do an episode about the NFL season every 4 weeks. And the first 2 of them, essentially the first half of the season, I had Russell Wilson as my MVP. And it wasn't until that third quarter of the season rolled around that he, plummeted down the MVP race to me. But that first half, I don't think there was anybody better. The lack of help has obviously caught up to him. But this could be, whether, if Goff doesn't play, this could be a gift-wrapped playoff win to help get them on track. And if they do have Goff, then here we go. That could be a great game. So we got me with the Seahawks. Either way, we have a conditional pick with Rob if Goff plays or not on if the Rams will win, and Nick is just going the Rams all the way. So that's our picks for that one. Moving to the late game on Saturday, we have the Washington football team, and I made sure I didn't say the other name, but the Washington football team will be hosting the wild card led Tampa Bay Buccaneers led by Tom Brady. We will talk about how they got in the playoffs towards the end of the show, but for now we're just focusing on the game. We have obviously the division champion with the losing record against one of the hotter teams in the NFL and in the wild card spot. The Washington football team have been a great story to overcome, the changing of their name, the firing of their GM, their coach having cancer, a partridge in a pear tree, everything they've had to deal with this year. It's been a great story, but I do feel this is where it ends. I think Tampa finally figured it out the last maybe 2 weeks of the season where they were kind of inconsistent beforehand. This is another perfect matchup for Brady to get, acquainted with the way NFC handles playoff games and the physicality that it tends to have more than most AFC teams, obviously outside of Pittsburgh and Baltimore. There's a little more finesse out there where it's a little different. Chase Young obviously he was running off the field saying, I can't wait to hit Tom Brady after yesterday's game. So that is something they're going to want to keep out for. But I'm still fairly confident that Tampa gets the win here.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and hop in front of Robert here. So
Sure.
A couple of things. First of all, with the, before whatever show we did throughout the year, the preseason show, quarterly updates, what have you, if you would have told me that Tom Brady was going to not only rank second in the league in touchdown passes with 40, but was going to have 2 more than Patrick Mahomes, I mean, I would have called you crazy. And that is exactly what happened. I know he has an embarrassment of riches. In fact, spoiler alert, this was my preseason pick to win the NFC, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. And while my pick doesn't look excellent, I still am very confident that they will be able to pull it off. Tampa's offense is loaded and they're rolling at the right time. But, the one concern is Tampa is 10-0 against non-playoff teams, 1-5 against playoff teams. And they play a Washington defense. And by the way, kudos to Phil to not falling into the former name of Washington like the Sunday Night Football crew did last night.
I'll say Al Michaels, they got him a couple times. I was kind of surprised.
Yeah, for sure. So that is a defensive line that is ridiculous, led by Chase Young. So Tom Brady and company, when they do have a top flight defensive line, just look back to some of the games against New Orleans, they do really struggle. So I think this will be a very tough matchup. I think it's the toughest matchup for a team that is as good as the Bucs, but I think they figure out a way to win close because they just got to have that guy behind center who just figures it out, and they'll knock out the football team, I believe, this weekend.
Ooh, well, I guess I might have to go with my bold prediction here, but Nick knows this fact about me. If you use over 2 quarterbacks in one season, I don't think that a team is very good in a sense because you don't have a lot of trust in your quarterback. Like Dwayne Haskins Jr. got released this season. Kyle Allen went out. They put in Alex Smith, and hey, comeback player of the year. Let's just put that out there. If he wins this game against Tampa Bay, just give him just name the award after him at this point because the man put in so much work. I think this running game for the Washington football team really stepped up this season. Antonio Gibson and J.D. McKissick just showed up towards the end of the season and really proved themselves. The defense, I got to give some kudos to John Bostic, Jonathan Allen, the rookie Chase Young. When I was watching the Niners Washington football team game, I have to say Chase Young was reckless. Like he just came out of nowhere. He covered a fumble, turned in for a touchdown, forced a fumble. I'm going to go with a bold prediction, guys. I have to. I know Tom Brady's my guy. Tom Brady, love you, man. But I think Alex Smith can win this game. And the Washington football team could prove me wrong if they play over 3 quarterbacks in one season. I'm just not a big fan of it, but I think Alex Smith has definitely proved haters wrong. I think he's going to keep proving it at least for one round of the playoffs.
I mean, that's not a bad rule of thumb. If somebody's playing 3 or more quarterbacks in a season, that's usually an indication that they don't have their stuff together. So I totally, get that rule of thumb that you're working with here. Surprising you're going against Brady because Nick tells me you guys went to the same high school. So that's kind of a big slight to your boy there, thinking he can't take on the Washington football team. But you never know. I mean, this is a team that's been proving people wrong all year. So what's one more at this point? And regardless of what happens, I'm with you on the 1, give Alex Smith the comeback player of the year award, and 2, just name it after him. Because at this point, this is what you need to do. If Joe Theismann would have came back from his injury, you could have named it after him. But now we have the modern day version in Alex Smith. So I agree 100%. They could lose 40-0 tomorrow or next week, and you can still name the award after him.
And Phil, I just got to mention one more thing.
Sure.
I mentioned one more thing here. With Alex Smith, he played for the 49ers. He's gone through so much hardship with the Niners when he went to the playoffs. He lost to the Giants twice, got injured. Colin Kaepernick went in front of him. He did not have trust in that 49ers organization. He leaves, goes to the Chiefs, leads them to the playoffs alongside Andy Reid. They couldn't get far enough, so Pat Mahomes gets the Chiefs to the Super Bowl and they win. I think this is Alex Smith's time to prove that he has the ability to take a team further in the playoffs. And I think if he was on the Niners and he did go to the Super Bowl, he would have won. Just pointing that out there. I think they had a great shot. I just wasn't the biggest fan when the Niners did that. And I think Alex Smith has a chance. That he convinced the Washington football team to let Dwayne Haskins Jr. go and release him. So you have to they put so much trust in this guy to run this offense. Let's see what he could do. Let's see if he shows up on Saturday.
I remember back in that Super Bowl, half joking, obviously that was during Kaepernick mania, but it's, what would the Ravens have done if the first drive or two, you just throw Alex Smith out there and totally throw off their game plan, maybe go up 10, 14 points, and then go back to Kaepernick and let him run around and everything. That's like that's a very bold strategy. It's easier said than done. But I remember thinking that back then because, that was all spotlights on Kaepernick at the time and how funny it would have been to just go back to like the epitome of efficiency with Alex Smith for a drive or two just to throw them off. But I agree. I mean, he's easily one of the most likable players in the league. It doesn't matter if he was on the Niners, the Chiefs, now the Washington football team. He's one of the most likable players. So I don't think anybody was upset to see him, battle back and get this great moment for himself.
And let's mention another 7-9 team that has won in the playoffs was the Seattle Seahawks in 2010. No one will ever forget that famous Marshawn Lynch run against the New Orleans Saints.
Right. So it's something that's totally been done. People, when these teams get in on these losing records, there's actually been, I think there was the 2014 Panthers was another or something to that effect. These teams that sneak in with these under 500 records, they tend to do well. They tend to win at least one game. So you never know what's going to happen. Jump into the Sunday games. We have the 1:00 battle with the Ravens traveling to the Tennessee Titans. Baltimore, kind of surprising to me, has a 3.5 points favorite according to Vegas. This is probably one of the tougher ones because I don't know what Ravens team is going to show up. They've looked invincible and sometimes, and other times they look like they can't run basic plays. Tennessee has kind of been the model of consistency aside from that, shellacking in the snow against Green Bay. And because of that, I think I have to go with Tennessee. I think they're just going to out physical them at the end of the day. When the Ravens are a tough team, but there's a drop of finesse to their game that has to be there for it to work well. And in games that it's not there, they don't really have a second gear or a second, plan of attack. So I think Tennessee is too rugged and will knock that little bit of finesse out of what they're attempting to do. And 3.5, I could see it right around there. I don't think they're going to blow them out by any means, but I think Tennessee will have just enough extra to squeak by Baltimore in this game.
So Baltimore runs for 403 yards against the Bengals just yesterday. Insane numbers. The fact that Zach Taylor, as far as I'm concerned, still has his job, I mean, that's insane to me.
Yeah.
I mean, how do you give up 403 yards rushing against a team that likes to run the ball? You knew it coming in. So, I digress. The Ravens, yes, have a passing attack that sometimes makes you grimace, hold on to both your eyes. I still think, and I love Derrick Henry, and I love what he accomplished. He and Terrell Davis are the only players in NFL history to run for over 2,000 and have 15 rushing touchdowns. Just incredible. I was with this throughout the year. I thought Derrick Henry was the most valuable player. We have the tapes, just as we have the tapes of this prediction. We have the tapes of the Derrick Henry thing. I don't think he wins MVP, but I think that he had such an insane season. He was the most valuable player in the league this year because of what he meant to that team. Right. Ryan Tannehill, how great he was, in my opinion, had a lot to do with him being able to run the play action and whatnot. But anyways, to make a long story short, love the Titans. I'm picking the Ravens in this game because I just have a little more trust in John Harbaugh and what he has been able to, put together there. And I know Lamar Jackson had a somewhat ugly year, but I just believe that this is an offense that will be able to do just enough. And I think the Titans went through just an onslaught against the Texans yesterday. I think that will put them into that game a bit gassed against the team in the Ravens that basically had a bye week. I know they played yesterday, but they basically had that game over by the first quarter.
That's true.
This game is really fun to watch. I think it's really going to come down to the wire. It's going to come down to a touchdown game. Titans and Baltimore, Tennessee and Baltimore have met this season, and it went to overtime. Derrick Henry getting the game-winning touchdown. This game is just, I feel like it's going to be so close, but I feel like I got to go against Nick here, and I got to agree with Phil. I think Tennessee is going to be the team that wins. Derrick Henry has looked solid in that game, had over 130 yards rushing against that Baltimore defense. Yes, Lamar Jackson looked great last season in the playoffs, but can Lamar Jackson carry that into this season? I'm not too sure on that one. I think Tennessee is going to pull this one out. Ryan Tannehill, kudos, man. I got to give him props. He shocked everybody by coming to Tennessee from a Miami Dolphins team that now maybe have found their quarterback. Not too sure yet with Tua because they keep putting in Ryan Fitzpatrick. But besides the point, I think I got to go with the Tennessee Titans, and they're going to win by a touchdown. Because we did see the Titans lose such an awful game against the Packers this season as well, and they did not look like themselves.
You mentioned the resurgence of Ryan Tannehill, and being from Florida, I'm not a Dolphins fan, but I know plenty of them. Ryan Tannehill was a punchline in his last year or so in Miami. So to see him go to Tennessee, and the first little bit, it was he's just the perfect game manager. What is it? It doesn't take much to just hand the ball off to Derrick Henry, but he has shown that he can shine when needed to. When Derrick Henry isn't going 100%, or they've kind of slowed him down because nobody stops him. You only hope to contain him. When he is being contained for a short amount of time, he's able to open those lanes back up because he will run the play action and deliver great passes. So I agree. His resurgence have been a big part of why Tennessee is doing as great as they are, and why I have them over the Ravens on Sunday. Excuse me. So like you said, though, that might be one of the tougher games to pick in this wild card weekend. Next up, we have the Bears traveling to New Orleans to take on Drew Brees and the Saints. Before we talk about the game itself, I hinted at it earlier. This game is airing on Nickelodeon in an effort to, I guess, interest more kids into the sport of football and things like that. I think the overall broadcast is going to be more kid-friendly. It's going to be more effects when people get in the end zone and things of that nature. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm home in time to watch this game, you're kidding yourself if you say you're not going to watch the Nickelodeon version, because you got to see what they're going to do. So I just want to throw that out there. This used to be a joke that people would make, like, oh, it's two bad teams. They're going to air the game on Comedy Central or Nickelodeon or something. Well, joke's on you, because now they're actually doing it. So before we even get into that, I just want to say kudos to them for trying this. I'm intrigued. So you got one viewer already, because I have to watch it on the Nickelodeon broadcast if I can find it. That being said, I don't know how competitive of a game this will be. I mean, I did not know the Bears made the playoffs. I had to look at the record and see, they got in at 8-8, which of course nobody's appalled by because it's a 500 record. But if you get in at 7-9, everybody loses their mind, I guess. But just 8-8 Bears team goes to New Orleans, where I think they're going to be outclassed in almost every way. And I have plenty of Bears fans as friends, and I don't mean any disrespect, but I don't think they're going to be able to hang with New Orleans for more than a quarter and a half. I got the Saints big.
Yeah, the Nickelodeon, if you picked all the 6 wildcard games as the one that probably needs some Nickelodeon sideshow in order to, bolster the attention, I think it would be Saints Bears.
Yes.
If New Orleans loses this game, it would be a major, major disappointment and embarrassment. And Drew Brees knows that this might be his last opportunity. So the Saints, I mean, if this even comes down to the wire, would be very frustrating, I'm sure, for New Orleans, who are better than this. They should handle the Bears by at least 10.
Yeah.
And I think they will.
Crazy to think we're talking about Drew Brees' potential last game. Last time these two teams did meet, though, it was a close game, and it came down to less than a touchdown, but I don't think that's going to be the case. Michael Thomas is back for the Saints, and I was a fantasy owner of Michael Thomas, and it was frustrating all season not seeing him play. But they have Alvin Kamara, who honestly I think has just looked phenomenal. 16 touchdowns this season. He looks like a monster. They don't use him as much as the Titans use Derrick Henry, but if they used Alvin Kamara as much as they use Derrick Henry, like in a Titans offense, and I think Alvin Kamara could definitely have like over maybe 1,500 rushing yards easily. The use of Taysom Hill has been interesting to say the least. I wasn't expecting Hill to play as much as I thought he would. I think he ran him before Drew Brees went down with his injury. When they were using Hill with Drew Brees on the field, I think it was at random times just to throw that defense off.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like if you're a defense, I think you read Hill as someone that's just going to run the football and not really throw it as much. But I think, and Nick knows I don't like using using two quarterbacks or three quarterbacks in a season. So I'm going to go with the Saints. Their offense is looking fire this season, and they're going to come out strong. I guarantee in Alvin Kamara, they're going to run the clock with him once they have a 2-touchdown lead.
Yeah, and that's definitely a way that it needs to be done, I think. And they'll get some Taysom Hill in here, but this should be a Drew Brees show. Definitely, I think this needs to reassert his dominance and get his swagger back, if you will, to move into the next round. So we all got the Saints, and we all got it pretty handily. Last game, a replay. We're gonna run it back from this past week. This will be the late game. The Browns in their first playoff appearance in about 20 years.
Since 02.
02, so 18 years, against the Steelers. Pittsburgh's favored by 4. If this game, I will talk about the game we just had towards the end of the show because it ties into my story about the Eagles I got to tell. But for the Steelers to play the Browns as close as they did with Mason Rudolph, and I believe it was Josh Dobbs even got some playing time, it's hard for me to think that having a fresh Ben Roethlisberger doesn't, when you lose by 2 points and you're playing this hybrid of backups and starters, when you're at full strength, to me, that puts it ahead. They're favored by 4. I could see them, if you take Pittsburgh, I could see them winning the game and you losing on the points there. I could see it being under a 4-point victory. But it's just what the Steelers do against teams in their own division. They find ways to win. How many times have they beaten the Ravens when it mattered the most, like in these weird situations? So I hope this is the only pick that I'm making today that I hope I'm wrong at. I hope the Browns are able to put it together. Here's my other thought. They had to empty the chamber to beat the Steelers to get into the playoffs. How much of that playbook do they still have to throw them off guard? I think they basically showed their hand to get into the playoffs, and we'll notice the Steelers will just kind of shut them down because now they've seen everything. So I got to go Pittsburgh on this one, but I'm not happy about
it. I'm going to go Cleveland. And I'm doing that with very little conviction, very little confidence, because like you said, I could see this potentially being Pittsburgh's game to not only win, but potentially roll, the Browns, considering that they have their firepower back next week. But I'm going on the basis of they didn't have their firepower this week. And I always, football is an interesting thing. I think in the NBA, you can rest guys during the year and, have that continuity for the playoffs. But football is the ultimate team sport. And when you have, an entire week game plan predicated to one guy, this is Robert Deiters, and his thought process throughout the year. When you put in one quarterback 1 week and then another guy the next week, that's not just a different level of quarterback. That's the offensive line playing differently to a guy. That's receivers running routes and catching passes a little bit different. And when you keep going back and forth like that, I believe that it does kind of mess up your rhythm. And when you do that right before the postseason, I don't think it really bodes well for you. Hence, and this is my biggest example of it, a couple of years ago when the Cowboys were the number 1 seed or number 2, and they barely snuck by they lost 6-0 to the Eagles. Remember that year?
Yep.
I think them benching their quarterback totally screwed the momentum. So, yes, I'm taking a team that lost to Pittsburgh by, I think, like 31 points when they played there earlier this year. But, yeah, I have Cleveland. They'll beat the Steelers 2 times in a row, in my opinion, led by Stefanski, who I believe is as good of a coach for this year as we have in the AFC North.
Wow, so two different predictions, and it comes down to me to pick who I'm going to be favoring for
You're
this
here.
one.
You're the tiebreaker. That's why you're here.
Oh, this is this is such a great game. This is gonna be fun. I think the Steelers have been a weird team in the running game. I just haven't seen James Conner do that much. Bobby Snell Jr. do that. I mean, Bobby Snell did have, what is it, one great game. That was it.
Yeah.
And then we see James Conner like, okay, he's doing well at the beginning of the season. Then we see him just, where's over like 50 yards rushing, my guy. I mean, I need something
Yeah.
out of you. I need at least a solid running game to kill that clock just a little bit. But when Ben Roethlisberger has to keep throwing that football, I think that's when Cleveland could kind of take advantage in a sense. I loved what Baker Mayfield has done this season. Don't get me wrong. I think he proved a lot of haters and a lot of doubters, but I still think that he's so inexperienced in the playoffs is the reason why I think they're going to lose this game. With Chubb, he played 12 games this season and still had over 1,000 yards rushing.
Yeah.
Wow. Great job by Chubb and Kareem Hunt. Kareem Hunt carried that load. That running game, I think, helped Baker Mayfield become a better quarterback this season, and his offensive line giving him more comfortability. But I think I got to go with the Steelers, man. I know they've been kind of struggling towards the end of the season with Juju's dances on the logo, but I like what Big Ben's going to be doing. I think we're talking about a guy that could be in one of his last runs too. Maybe, he has maybe 2 more seasons left in him at most, but I got to go with a more experienced team, and I got to go with the Steelers, but I think the Browns are going to put up a close game this season. Also, I want to talk about the fact that Odell Beckham Jr. played 7 games this season, and the Browns still became 11-5.
Yeah.
Like, congratulations. They didn't need a big-time wide receiver to get that done. They had Jarvis Landry and Rashad Higgins. And Austin Cooper, don't get me wrong, I think came up really big this season as well. I think it's going to come down to a field goal, but I got to go with Pittsburgh, man. They've been the hotter team. They were undefeated for most of the season. But the Browns just, I don't think they have it just yet, but I think this is a sign for the Browns that they are getting better, and I think they trade Odell Beckham and they get some better weapons to keep moving on. You can keep Chubb and Hunt. I think this team is meant for the future, but not this playoff round.
Yeah, I think you kind of took where I was going with that too. Was they almost got better when Odell went down, and I think to see what they could accomplish, you already said it. I think they have to look at the real possibility of trading him for some picks or some pieces that helps them do what they actually do well better. Whether it's adding to the run game, improving the O line, getting a slot type receiver instead, with some picks thrown in there. Who knows how they'll do it? Obviously, this draft's going to be an exciting one. Something we'll talk about down the line. He could easily be a trade piece needed for that. But that is all of the wild card games and the way Zoom works. We only have Rob here for about a minute or two more before it's going to boot us out of here. So I want to say thanks for being here. We look forward to maybe predicting the next round with you. And while we have another minute, the floor is yours if there's any other topic you want to bring up.
First and foremost, I think it's going to come down to NFC, Breeze and Rodgers. For the AFC, it's going to be a tough one, but I think it's going to be Big Ben. I think it's going to be 2 old quarterbacks going at it to win that Super Bowl, but I can't wait to hopefully predict the next round with you guys. And thank you, Phil, and thank you, Nick, for having me on. I really appreciate it. This was really fun.
Rob Deiters out in Reno, Nevada. Thanks, man. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.
All right, we're back after a quick break. Thanks again for Rob for being on here. That was cool. We haven't done 3 guests at one time, so now that we know that we can, maybe we'll do a little bit more of that. We're going to transition to end of the year awards, particularly the we already know who Nick thinks should be Rookie of the Year, so we'll just leave that alone. But as far as MVP, we're new MVP and Coach of the Year candidates. You touched on it already for MVP, so I'll let you go ahead and finish that thought. Who would you pick as MVP?
I would pick Derrick Henry, but I would be shocked if he wins because Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes are just special. I think Aaron Rodgers wins it, and I think the main thought process is Rodgers has more touchdowns, and I think, the fan bases love touchdowns more, and I think that's what it comes down to go along with the story that Green Bay, earns that number 1 seed and he plays all 16 games. That was another big one. I have Aaron Rodgers, but the insane thing is somebody's not going to win of those 3, MVP or Offensive Player of the Year. And this is one of the few years where it seems like there is all 3 capable attendees to New York for this trophy. There really is. All of them were great.
Right, and I agree with you on both accounts. If it's up to me, I'm picking Derrick Henry, and it's probably going to go to Aaron Rodgers, and there's nothing wrong with that. The dude had more touchdowns than his team had punts. When you do that, you deserve to be the MVP. I get that. Yeah. That being said, Offensive Player of the Year should easily go to Derrick Henry, and I don't feel bad about Mahomes being left out this year because the Chiefs feel like they sleptwalked through giant chunks of the season. So when you do that, you kind of get left out of these superlatives and things like that. You mentioned how with quarterbacks, it's the touchdown numbers is what people always look at. It's almost the opposite with running backs. We all know at the moment, Derrick Henry hit that 2K club. Does anyone know how many touchdowns he have? Not on hand. I'd have to look it up. It's just not the same. Obviously, you want your running back to score. If he runs 99 yards and doesn't get in the end zone, that comes back to bite you eventually. But with running backs, it's all about yards. And with quarterbacks, it's all about touchdowns. There's only been, 4 or 5 running backs to hit that 2,000-yard club. None of them have won MVP. So I would like to see this be the time that it happened. And shout out to the Titans as an organization. Out of the 5 guys that have done it, 2 of them were playing for Tennessee at the time, obviously CJ 2K, Chris Johnson, and now Derrick Henry. So we're kind of feeling the same way on this. If it was up to us, it'd be Derrick Henry, but I think I'd be shocked if it's not Aaron Rodgers the way he's playing.
We got one more argument on the Derrick Henry thing. The difference between Aaron Rodgers and Patrick Mahomes, as we all know, is this. Mahomes has more yards. Aaron Rodgers has more touchdowns. Rodgers has a slightly better passer rating and slightly better completion percentage, but Mahomes has more wins. It's very, very close call. The difference between Derrick Henry's 2,000 and I think Dalvin Cook has like 1,300, 14. It's massive in touchdowns too. It's the Grand Canyon. And when you look at Titans games with so much attention drawn defensively to Derrick Henry, I think if defenses played Derrick Henry like he was just the league average at running back, whoever that is, I think he runs for 2,500. The dude is insane. He's running for 2,000 with 9-10 guys in the box. It's incredible. And when you think about the game winners he's had, I mean, it's to me, and I like Alabama, so I'm a little extra biased here, but Derrick Henry, the guy was ridiculous this year.
Yeah. 700 more yards than the next closest running back. I mean, that's that some starting running backs rush for 700 yards, and he's 700 yards more than the second place guy. So it's if he doesn't win MVP, I'll take solace in knowing that he wins Offensive Player of the Year. That'll be fine where I'm at. I'll let you go first on this one. Coach of the Year, who are you going with?
For most of the year, I was going with Brian Flores, but I think the tiebreaker is that Kevin Stefanski's Browns made the playoffs and Brian Flores didn't. And then when you look a bit farther, yes, I know he had one quarterback the whole year. Miami was dancing around with Fitzpatrick and Tua midway through games, midway through drives. This was a franchise that, to me, had far worse culture than Miami. The Dolphins were a solid team for years, and to me, it felt less of culture and more of they just didn't have enough players, to surround Cameron Wake and some of those great players from before. Cleveland was a dumpster fire. Cleveland is one of the only teams ever to go 0-16 in the season, and I get it, they have great players now, but this culture went 7-9 last year, and Kevin Stefanski was able to completely turn this thing around in a very good division. I just predicted in the previous segment, I think Baltimore wins against Tennessee in a very tough matchup. Pittsburgh, I don't take solace in picking against them, but I think the Browns and Kevin Stefanski wins. This guy's amazing, and I didn't think he would be amazing, but he has proved me wrong too. There's another prediction I thought was wrong. I didn't think Stefanski could turn it around like this because Cleveland was a laughingstock for a long time. And, he's done an incredible job. So, and he's not going to win it, but I also believe that the head coach of Green Bay, Matt LaFleur, I think he's not going to win it, but that guy really, after the disappointment of last year, he really impressed me too.
It's funny when you pick your pick for these awards sometimes, and you're like, it should be this guy, but deep down he's not going to win it. We've both said it about Derrick Henry. You just said it about a couple people. My pick, I do think, has a chance to win it, and it's Sean McDermott at Buffalo, because what he's done to win the AFC East and finally release the stranglehold that New England has had on that division, to be the second seed, to win these big games, and to look like one of the hottest teams with the one quarterback, and to build it. Sometimes Coach of the Year is based on one season, and sometimes it's a body of work. You want to talk about changing the culture somewhere. Buffalo went from, it was the Jets, it was them, and it was Cleveland. Like, for the longest time, that's the basement. Welcome to it. The Bills have not been in the basement for 5 years now. Even when they were a 7-win team, when they went to the playoffs and lost to Jacksonville, when they had Tyrod Taylor as their quarterback, they were looked at differently from that season on. That they're not a pushover. They had flaws. They weren't a particularly great team. Obviously, losing the playoff game to Houston really hindered that, but they were able to bounce back. And obviously, this first big playoff game against a very winnable Colts team could have a lot to do with that. But I got to go Sean McDermott. What he's done in Buffalo it's been great to watch. As someone whose team is not in the playoffs, they are the team that I am watching and rooting for through this whole thing. So for me, yeah, definitely Sean McDermott for Coach of the Year. And obviously the opposite of the Coach of the Year is the coach that's been fired today, obviously, as a recording being known as Black Monday, when a lot of coaches got fired. Some people got a little bit they got the jump start on that. The Jets finally letting go of Adam Gase late last night. The teams without head coaches, the list is as follows: the Jags, the Jets, the Chargers, the Falcons, the Lions, and the Texans. The Texans, I believe, were the first team about midway through the year getting rid of Bill O'Brien, and the Lions not too long ago as well. We'll know more about who these, and I will jump on it now. The Chargers late last night also getting rid of Anthony Lynn. Before we break on all the rest of these, we'll let you air some grievance here about what do you think about their releasing it, because I don't know the team as well as you do. It took me a little bit by surprise based on they're on the up and up. They clearly found their guy in Herbert. I thought I understand the record wasn't what it wanted to be, but figured you give this guy one more year with his quarterback knowing he's going to be the guy. But they did not see it that way. So what do you think?
Two things. First of all, before I get to that, on the record, comeback player of the year, Alex Smith for me, Alex Smith for you.
Just for wanted to say anyone that watches football, it's Alex Smith.
That's right. And second thing is, so with Anthony Lynn, to be honest, as a Charger guy, I'm excited that the franchise didn't fall into the trap that the Falcons did with Dan Quinn from last year, where the team, due to his blunders, late game coaching blunders, and same story with Anthony Lynn, the Falcons, they go on this winning tear down the stretch. I think they win 3 or 4 or 5, something like that. So, they look good down the stretch. Falcons bring them back, and they were pitiful to start the year. It was the onside kick with the Dallas Cowboys that mounted that insane comeback. The Falcons, you fired them after 4 or 5 games, and they really could have saved some grief by just moving on last year. Same deal with the Chargers. Coaching blunders late in games was the memory of the first half of the year for LA. Then they turn around and win 4 straight. With that said, the last game yesterday was against the JV Chiefs. It wasn't just their quarterback down, but pretty much every star player on the Chiefs did not play. So Anthony Lynn, in my opinion, is a fine man. The Chargers released a statement, most honorable man a head coach in the league. And I would be remiss to find a guy other than Andy Reid that's more beloved as a head coach in the NFL. This was the right move. I know it's tough. I know they have questions about who would be the next guy. And I like a Eric Bieniemy in Kansas City. Yeah. I would be frustrated if it was Urban Meyer of Ohio State, just considering, how old he is.
And how flaky he is. Every 3 years, he has an ailment that just gets him out of a contract. And then 3 years later, he goes and signs somewhere else. That's not someone you want long term. He can give you a shot in the arm for a year or two, but he's not. If you're looking to build something, consistency and loyalty and Urban Meyer don't mesh well together.
Yeah, he needs more time with his family, Phil. That's the problem. Of course.
And then he gets sick of them after like a year, apparently.
Yeah, apparently. So, he does great work, just not necessarily, long term. So, anyways, right. I think this was the right move. And, LA is in great hands. We've been, in terms of all of the coaching vacancies you mentioned, this has to be on paper with the cap space available. They have like $60-70 million in cap space, which is insane to me because they signed Joey Bosa, the defensive end, the most lucrative defensive end contract ever, which when you think about the guys in the league today, I know Joey Bosa is great, but it's like amazing how much money they gave to this guy. And they still have so much cap space. Derwin James comes back next year. This team was top, I think it's 13, 14. This was the case going into yesterday's games. Top 13, 14 of the league in offense and defense. And they finished 7-9. And they started the year 3-9. So this team's good. Talent's not the problem. It's, the culture and the coaching, to be quite frank. That was the problem from last year. And I think another year under the tutelage of these coordinators, both of them are in their early 30s, so they'll get a chance to get a year more experienced. I think the sky's the limit for this guy and, the Chargers, whoever they pick as head coach.
I agree with you because my follow-up question would be, out of the vacancies, what is the most attractive job? And I agree. I think the Chargers it could be the first one. Jacksonville is this weird – it has the potential, could sell somebody because you have the number one pick. If you want Trevor Lawrence, you go get Trevor Lawrence. You want Justin Fields, you get Justin Fields. We've seen what this area can look like, in the Blake Bortles years when they're going to the AFC Championship, the way that stadium can fill up and it can be a great place to win football games if you have the right pieces. And there's been talks of Urban Meyer going there to, he has a relationship with Justin Fields or maybe, if they could pull him away from Clemson, you could pick up your guy, Trevor Lawrence, and just keep it moving in the pros. That's definitely a unique situation. Don't know how likely it is, but I think Jacksonville and the Chargers are the two most attractive options right now. Atlanta has their issues. Houston is a mess, but you have a star quarterback. So, if that's what you want as your jumping point, you can do that at least. And everyone else is kind of in the middle. I don't know what the Jets do. I don't know what the Lions do. There's plenty of others that I'm not totally sure. And whenever somebody fires, like whether it be a college team, right, where Texas just fired their head coach and they picked up the Alabama's OC, like
Sarkisian, yeah.
Yeah, I think within the same Zoom call, they hung up on the one coach and they rung up the other coach, I think, because it happened within like 42 minutes of each other. But whenever somebody gets fired and fans are happy, like, oh, we got that guy out of here, whatever. My question to them is always, all right, well, then who do you want as your coach? Like, you just fired one. Who do you want? And more times than not, they don't have an answer. And if you don't know who you want as your next coach, don't be happy that yours is now fired. For example, I don't know if Doug Peterson will be the coach next year. The reason I'm not saying yell to fire Doug is I don't know who I'd want. The only guy that I can name right now is Eric Bieniemy. And I think he is the number one coaching prospect in the league for any team. Doesn't matter who you are. That guy would make your team better. So unless we're getting him, I'm not on the fire Doug train necessarily. Not because he hasn't worked his way into that hot seat necessarily, but if I don't know who I want, I'm not just gonna. You don't fire people just to fire people. You have to have a plan. It's got to be step one in a plan. You're now moving forward. So other than Eric Bieniemy, if you can think of anyone, who would you say is the best potential head coach for one of these teams? Or do you think Bieniemy is the guy?
The funny thing, and this was the case in 2017 when the Chargers hired Anthony Lynn. Usually there's only one great coach a year that gets hired.
Yep.
And that was the case with Sean McVay, who was in the same class of Anthony Lynn, and 4 or 5 guys I can't even remember were hired that year. That was just how bad they were. Mm-hmm. In fact, I think most of them just got fired along with Anthony Lynn this year. So I think Eric Bieniemy by far and away is number one. Considering that this team did not – they went 14-1 before they rested all their guys. I know Andy Reid has something to do with that and how talented they are, but this offense is ridiculous. And I think a lot of Patrick Mahomes playing so well early was due to him. And to be honest, Phil, I don't have a second place for you.
Right. The gap is pretty big.
That's why, I'm higher on Doug Peterson, in my opinion, than most. I think he still has a chance to prove something, but I could also see the Eagles having another 4-win year under Doug Peterson, because I think he's one of those coaches that wears out a locker room like a John Harbaugh. So I could see that happening as well. With that said, I think this is the year where guys like Zach Taylor keep their job and Doug Peterson keep their job, because there's one overwhelming favorite. And to me, if he doesn't go to the Chargers, it would be a bit of a surprise because of just how good of a situation it is. If there wasn't a Chargers on the market, I think Zach Taylor and Doug Peterson get fired because I think they would have a legitimate chance of getting him. But, I know I sound like a homer here, but I don't think there's much of a chance that he doesn't go with LA if he doesn't stay with Kansas City. That's the other thing we're talking about. We thought he was going to be gone last year, and he stayed.
Yeah, when you win the Super Bowl, your stock's as high as it can go, and really to stay, and it's still very high, but I mean, it's hard to not be higher than when you're walking off with a Lombardi. They could win it again this year, and then he could, he gets that much more money for it or whatever. But yeah, to me, it's Bieniemy, and then the gap is the Derrick Henry rush yard situation. It's 700 yards between the two people. This has been a great episode. I don't get worked up very often on these shows. They're usually pretty lighthearted, but some stuff went down yesterday that I now have to get worked up. Nick, feel free to stick around and hang out, but I'm going to have to go on a rant here for a minute. So you'll get it first. You'll be able to listen to it first, but he's just going to chill out. All right. So we have the Eagles Washington football team game that was on last night. That if
my popcorn.
Yeah, you get your popcorn ready because here it comes. And if Washington won, which they did, they get to the playoffs, and the Giants don't get to the playoffs. There is this weird, high horse riding people that think that the Eagles went out of their way to sabotage a 6-win team, New York Giants, out of the playoffs. And by doing so, allowing another division rival to beat them on their home field to clinch a division. And to me, this is absolutely ludicrous. No one has ever – and if you're the Giants, if you're a Giants fan, a Giants player, and there was a lot of them that jumped on this narrative right away that, they're doing this to keep us down. They hate us more than the Redskins. I didn't say it. They did in the tweet. They hate us more than the Redskins. That's why they're doing this. Golden Tate tweeted, the Eagles just hate the Giants. He was an Eagle 2 years ago. I don't know if he doesn't remember that now or whatever. But the thought that people were doing that putting in Nate Sudfeld, the third-string quarterback, after Jalen Hurts threw for under 80 yards in 3 quarters and an interception, that it's ungodly to think that he could be pulled. And before anyone says, well, he's a rushing quarterback, he ran for 2 touchdowns, he ran for 34 yards. He was in the red zone. The play broke contained. He ran it for a touchdown. He got points on the board, but this was not a Michael Vick performance with his legs, all right? This is not – if you can't tell by now, I think I've mentioned it in the last one. For some reason, people are over Carson Wentz. They're ready to ship him out of town. If that does happen, I hope he goes to the Colts because I think that would be a great situation with Frank Reich and everything, and he will revitalize his career because I'm a fan of Carson Wentz. He's a part of that banner that's over my shoulder on this side over here. So he's a player that I will always care about, regardless of if he started the Super Bowl or not. Without his performance, we don't get there. So him and Nick Foles are equally responsible for the banner over my shoulder. I don't care who played in 14 games and who played in 3. They both were needed to get that shit done. So because of that, I will always say when Nick Foles left, I was someone that I wanted to see do well. And he's done okay for himself. Clearly, it wasn't the match made in heaven when he's moved on. But the thought that the Eagles put in Nate Sudfeld just to screw the Giants makes no sense. And for people to feel bad for the Giants makes even less sense. If you want to feel bad for a team, don't make it the 6-win Giants. Make it the 10-win Dolphins that missed out because the Steelers did the same thing, playing their backup quarterback against the Browns. That way, worst case scenario, that if they do win, they get to play the Browns the next week after they, as I mentioned earlier, have to unload the clip and show all their great plays, which is why I think Pittsburgh is beating Cleveland. The same thing happened with the Cleveland-Pittsburgh situation that kept the Dolphins out of the playoffs as happened in this situation. The difference is the Dolphins had double-digit wins and the Giants have double-digit losses. So I don't know when we started to feel bad for 6-win teams missing the playoffs because that doesn't happen usually, right? Whoever won the NFC East this year was going to be a meme. We knew that. The Redskins, the Washington team that won it with 7 wins is the best of a terrible situation because we've had 7-win teams in before. Robert mentioned the Seahawks earlier in the podcast. So it's become like, okay, we've seen this before. It's a little nutty, but, people have won. It is what it is. But the thought that the Eagles would do this just to screw the Giants makes no sense to me. That does not benefit them at all. If they're tanking at all, it's because losing this game gave them the 6th draft pick and winning it would have given them the 9th or the 10th. So if there's any reason to do this, it's for the better draft pick. And that still puts you a little bit out of if you're trying to draft a quarterback, that kind of puts you out of the range of getting one because all the good ones will be gone by then. So I don't think Jalen Hurts is the future of this team. That does not mean he's a bad football player. That does not mean if he wins, if he starts next year and we start the year 2-1, 4-2, that I'm going to be shocked because he's a great athlete. I don't think he's a long-term answer. I think he's a poor man's Kyler Murray, and Kyler Murray is a poor man's Russell Wilson, if that makes sense to everybody out there. So I've already been up my cousin who's an Eagles fan have told me that I'm a Jalen Hurts hater. I've had plenty of other Eagles fans tell me that I haven't given him an honest try. We've seen this before. We know what it's like for a guy to take the league by storm and kind of get found out after a season's-ish of film. Look at Lamar Jackson. He won the MVP last year, and now people know enough about him that he can still look great at times, but he's not, taking the world by storm. Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback. He's not a guy that's going to he's not the guy you build around. He's not Russell Wilson, and he's barely Kyler Murray. And the questions are still out on Kyler Murray, I think, based on missing the playoffs this year. So I'm going to take a breath, and I'll let all that bounce off of Nick. I appreciate him sticking around for this, but I had to get it out. Usually I don't live tweet during games and stuff like that. But when I started seeing this, it just had to be said, because I don't like the whole, and then people are questioning the franchise as a whole and the people behind it and the fortitude of them and the no class or whatever. And granted, Eagles fans have got a bad rap forever, but to say that there's like bad people running the organization because they put in a 3rd-string quarterback in a game that didn't matter to them at all. Like, I'm sorry it mattered to the Giants so much to get in the playoffs with a 6-win team, but like, didn't matter to us at all. And we did it for the draft pick. We didn't do it to keep you out of the playoffs. Because, I mean, if we cared about our division rival not getting into the playoffs, it was happening either way. It was either you or the Redskins. So it is what it is. There it is. I feel better.
Whew. I was just going to ask, so you're feeling better over there?
Yeah, you think about how you're going to say these things, and it never comes out the way you planned it. But I think I got my point across. So, yes, I feel a lot better.
You got your point across. That was not the problem. You didn't tell me where you were going. I knew you were going to talk about this, but I didn't know which way you were going. Either you were going to say, the Eagles are ridiculous for tanking the game or what have you. I didn't know which way you were going.
Right.
And I made my Doug Peterson comment before you said that. So I would have felt a little weird if you went the other way.
Yeah.
To me, I wouldn't have made the switch, but I understand it because there's no, first of all, I don't get why we feel so bad about it. Maybe we wanted to see, because the sick part of me wanted to see a 6-10 with the division so bad. I just wanted to see, no matter who it was, a 6-win team make it. But I'm with you. Like they had the game that Philly fans should be upset about is the Cincinnati game, and we were on that earlier. That's the game to get upset about, not this one.
Yeah, you win that game, you probably you either win the division or you're like the other 3 teams that going into this week that. If the right things go this way, you're heading to the playoffs. And we were that team last year. We were the team that limped into the playoffs in a bad division. We played a tough Seattle team that, I don't think it's unrealistic to say could have gone a different way if Carson Wentz doesn't get a concussion in the first quarter, right? We lost that game 17-9 with Josh McCown as our quarterback. No offense to him. He's actually, he's still in the league just because people love, his football mind so much. Probably a guy that's going to be a coordinator or a coach. He's going to go the Kellen Moore route when he's done playing, I would think. But
Leftwich, I love what he's doing in Tampa.
Absolutely. Former Jaguar, definitely, seen him play a whole lot. We reviewed We Are Marshall on the channel recently. He played there, and we gave him a shout out there. But yeah, a lot of these, former quarterbacks that were, average to better than average becoming coordinators is definitely a fad we're starting to see. All I'm trying to say is the Eagles did not do anything to hinder the Giants. This was strictly on their situation. And I don't know where we're going with this. I don't know if Carson's getting traded. As I said, if he does, it should be to the Colts because they have the cap room and the connections with Frank Reich. And they have, you mentioned the Chargers having so much cap room. I think the Colts have even more, and you guys have your quarterback in place. So if he goes somewhere, it should be the Colts. I would like to see, I think if it comes down to Carson and Doug Peterson and one of them has to be fired, in normal situations, you almost stick with the star player. But Carson does not seem to have the backup of the franchise right now. And that could be because Doug is that woven into the franchise. I don't know. I guess where I'm at is between Doug and Carson, both won't be back next year. I don't know which one's going to be gone. I think at the end of the day, it's not going to shock me if Carson goes elsewhere and starts playing at a borderline MVP level again. Won't shock me in the slightest. It'll shock me if Jalen Hurts ever plays that way, you know? And this, I'm sounding like Nick before with Justin Herbert, right? Like he didn't slander the guy. He didn't throw dirt on his name, but he did not think he was going to be super spectacular, and he seems to be. So I could be sitting here next year, and this is a team that Zach Ertz might have played his last game for this team. That's been a big rumor going. I don't know if that means he's going to retire or they're not renewing his contract or whatever it is. That is another guy. For example, when we drafted him, I'm like, that is a great player, but what are we doing drafting tight ends? We have Brent Selleck, and that's a guy that played here for 11 years. He was on the Super Bowl team. Little did I know all these years later that Zach Ertz would catch the game-winning touchdown in the Super Bowl. So it's a little bit different because you can have multiple tight ends, you can have multiple receivers and running backs, but your quarterback, you can only have one. And if you were going to screw up your relationship with Carson Wentz, why did you do it for a Jalen Hurts level talent? It's one thing if you do it for a Trevor Lawrence level talent or a Trey Lance, which that would have been weird because they're both North Dakota State guys or whatever. But I don't know, even when stuff's going bad on my team or my school or whatever, if you can see where they're going with it, you're a little more comfortable. I don't know where we're going with this, and I'm not going to speculate any more than I already have, and all I can do is react to it when it happens. But I'll leave it at I don't think Doug and Carson will both be back.
I agree with your sentiments. I'm glad you got that off your chest, and I thoroughly enjoyed watching the entertaining soliloquy that you had there.
Yeah.
So I'm with you. I think to me, I think Carson will be gone. I think Hurts is fine, but I'm with you. I don't think he's going to be great. But as we know, we're not perfect on quarterback prediction.
No. I mean, a guy that I didn't think Jared Goff was fantastic when it came down to the Eagles picking between Wentz and Goff. I'm like, if we're going quarterback, Wentz is my guy. I have no confidence in Goff. That seems to kind of work out. I think Wentz at his best has been way better than Goff at his best. I don't think anybody can really dispute that. I mean, everybody was happy for the Jets to get Sam Darnold. Was never a fan of his, right? That seems to work out for me, right?
I was never a fan of him either.
Right. Not even, and you're right in the heart of USC country, and that's someone that, you could easily hitch your wagon to, but I saw nothing special from that guy. There's other people like Deshaun Watson. I had no reason to think he wasn't going to be great, right? Like you can, when you have to reach to make a guy great, like I don't think that's great news to start with. So I could be wrong, and I don't even mind being wrong. It's just as of right now, I don't think Hurts is the future of the Eagles. And if that offends people, facts don't care about your feelings. For the people that think that we sabotage this amazing 6-win Giants playoff run, get off the cross because we need the wood, because it had nothing to do with them. It had everything to do with what we were going to do. Yep. You got anything else before we wrap this puppy up?
See, whatever I say from after that will not do justice. You just literally slammed it home. So I'm just going to let you ride it out there to the finish. I appreciate you letting me watch that rant, and I loved Robert Deiters and what he brought to the show earlier today. I think we can all agree Hurts might work out, Hurts might not. Robert Deiters on this podcast with us. That's going to work out if he can join us.
Worked out. Years and years ago when me and Nick first started doing these kind of shows, I don't even remember what program we were using, but we needed to use like the house phone, and we called into a certain number and we could stream the show. Robert used to be our favorite caller even back then, and I think that'll continue to be the same. He will be a much welcomed guest every time. I have no idea how long this episode is, but I guarantee you it's longer than a normal one because of my rant there. So if you listened all the way to the end or watched all the way to the end, we want to say thank you and Happy New Year. And 2021 is going to be a big year for the podcast. Between this, the Wrestle Report, the movie reviews, I want to make a lot more content now, feel a lot more comfortable. I got a lot of people helping me, like this guy, next to me on the screen here, amongst other people, Donovan, Luke, and just to name a few. I plan to have other people on the show moving forward. But it's going to be a great year for the Phil Talk Sports Podcast Network, and this is just the beginning of it. Enjoy Super Wildcard Weekend, and we'll see you next time.